Hey guys, welcome back to the Sure Parenting podcast, where every parent deserves to feel sure of their parenting. I'm your host, Sammy Bell, creator of Sure Parenting and author of Sure Parenting, Building Blocks to Create Their Best Childhood. Here on the podcast, we address the issues that make parents question themselves or their kids, and we discuss creative solutions that meet the needs of each unique parent and child. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back. We are here today with Amanda Woodbury.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited to have this conversation with the Ways We Mom podcast idea. I really wanted to make sure that I could share voices that weren't just mine, because I think we all have unique experiences and we all have learning paths that we go on in our motherhood journey. And even right in the little preview section before we started, you taught me something. So I'm super excited for this conversation. Would you introduce yourself to this crew and tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do? Yeah, that stuff.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Amanda Woodbury. So I am a intuitive mindset crochet instructor. So I basically just teach crochet for the emotional benefits that we get from it.
I love that. And I've taken classes with you because it's sort of a lost art. I know growing up, it was seen as sort of like old lady stuff. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize like the reason these old ladies were doing this is because it's therapeutic. Yeah, before things like BetterHelp, you had to figure out how to stress release at home.
Yes, exactly. And doing something creative it releases all sorts of happy chemicals. And so I'm just bringing that forward a little bit more.
I love it. All right. And how many kiddos do you have?
I have 2 boys.
Awesome. How old are they?
So my youngest is 10, turning 11 this weekend. And and my oldest is 13.
Nice. So you have been through some stages. You had said that you and your husband had to work to break some cycles. Can you tell us a little bit about whatever you're comfortable with, because you never have to share anything you're not comfortable with, first of all, but a little bit about what made you want to break cycles? Why did you choose to break cycles? What cycles did you decide to break? And if you can, like, how did you join forces with your husband in that? Because I think that is something that can be so tricky.
So the way I'll explain it is this. So my husband was raised by late boomer generation, and he's at the tail end of the Gen X generation. So if you're familiar with any of those terms, you've probably seen all the memes, like how they were raised, all the TikToks about how they're raised. That's very true. So he's more of like very masculine, like we don't talk about our feelings. We don't, physical punishment, like spanking is okay and all that stuff. I was raised by a early Gen Xer, and I am a millennial, an early millennial. So I'm in that, like, I understand that. Like, I was raised understanding, like, we don't talk about emotions and we spend a lot of time alone. So I was raised, like, by a Gen Xer, like, in the millennial world. So I'm kind of, like, on that border of, like, yeah, I get that, but that's not healthy. So with those cycles, I pretty much was raised in a way of like, that did not help me. I had a lot of childhood traumas, and my husband, I'm pretty sure he's had some childhood traumas, but he doesn't talk about it. So I don't know for sure. And I'm just trying to like live by example for him.
Yeah. I think that's something really important. I just want to grab that. We can't actually always change somebody else. So there are certain rules and boundaries you can set in your relationship. There's hard lines, and you should really have these conversations before you have children. But being the example can be really powerful. And if you are unsure, I know trauma is a big buzzword, and there's kind of this like counter movement now of like, not everything's trauma, which is true. But there is an ACEs test that anybody can look at online, and it's only 10 questions, and you can kind of get a feel for like, do I have childhood trauma? And also understand that the thing itself isn't inherently going to be trauma for you. Being left alone to deal with something overwhelming is. And so a thing that happened to one person maybe didn't land as trauma for them because they had another person in their life that was like, oh yeah, this wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened. Let me help you through it. And that protects them from that becoming a trauma versus somebody else who the thing happened and it was like, yeah, well, you deserved it. Right. Now my whole system is like, I am little and I don't understand the world and why are my family hurting me?
Yeah.
And that can land and stay. And that has to be processed as an adult. So I totally get the rejection of the whole idea, but it is 10 questions and you can do it privately and nobody has to know your answers, but you can get a number. Anything over 3 or 4 is where you start to see correlations with like lifelong symptomology. So higher risk of disease, shorter lifespans, like kind of important stuff. So it's worth knowing. I was surprised when I finally got my husband to just take that test at his number because he also does not talk about things. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So sometimes, I mean, he still kind of just poo-poos the whole thing, which is fine, but it is interesting to have that knowledge as the spouse of this might be influencing where you're coming from in your opinions, you know?
Yep, absolutely. And so like we both we never really had like the talk of like how we're going to raise our children. We just kind of jumped in and just like, so we're still learning. Right. Yeah. So we both knew like we did not enjoy our childhoods. So we don't want to repeat that.
Yeah.
And so we are just doing everything different than what our parents did.
Nice.
So yes, he had a stay-at-home mom. So he really stressed that he really wanted me to be a stay-at-home parent. And I'm fine with that because my mom was a single mom. And so she worked 2-3 jobs most of my childhood.
Yeah.
And, we had a couple different stepdads that, that's a whole thing. So I was like, so there really wasn't a lot of consistency. And so I was like, okay, I'm fine. And I am totally 100% on board with being the stay-at-home mom, being the consistent. Like, that's what I'm going to do.
Nice.
The things that we differ in is the different values and how we are teaching our children things. Obviously the same core beliefs, the same core values, but it's how we are presenting them. So I'm more of the, we need to explain where we're coming from on a situation, and we need to let them have choices. We need to honor them and let them have these choices. And he's like, nope, this is our rules. They need to follow them. This is what it is. And you need to like back me up. And I'm like, okay, there's some things we agree, some things we don't. So,
which is going to happen in every family. And I think that there is a value to having different perspectives, but you're hitting something really important there, which is that if we want our children to actually learn and not just operate from a place of fear and control, but actually learn the why behind it and integrate, oh, these are my values now. We have to put our ego aside. We have to take the time to help them to make those same connections that we've already made. And the challenge that sometimes parents will run into is they put their ego into somebody else's behavior. I'm a good dad if my kids keep their room spotless. That's a bad place to put your emotional safety.
Yeah.
Like, we can't control other people's behavior. So if instead we look at ourselves as the leaders, and when we notice a problem, we solve a problem, then we can stay in that mental place of I'm a good parent, even when there's challenges and things that come up, because part of being a parent is teaching our kids. So like, there's the thing. Let's teach how this goes, how this goes and how to integrate, that when you do clean your room, your brain gets some space to function more clearly. When you take care of your things, then they can last longer. They can provide you more use and benefit because they have been cared for in a way that protected them. And, my son and I watched a cleaning expert on YouTube, and she talked about some of the emotional benefits of making your bed. And he went up and made his bed because he's like, I kind of get it now. Sometimes having an outside mentor can provide perspective that it just clicks for our kids in a way that maybe hearing the same thing from mom over and over again for 15 years maybe doesn't click the same way. And I don't think we have to be afraid of that either. Like if we call in our family or our friends or, community mentors that are able to share wisdom with our kids too, that can be really cool. So when you and I were talking about your kiddos, you were talking about one of them, like how they create their own like emotional comfort. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that because one, it was super cute. And two, you used a term that I had never heard before.
So what I was talking about was how my 10-year-old is a nester. Mm-hmm. So he creates nests, and it's not, and like what I was telling you, it's not about that he feels the need to create safety away from the outside world, but it is just such a comfort to him to know that he has his favorite things around him constantly. And it is straight up comfort. Like it's not because he feels like unsafe or anything like that. It's just, it's kind of a family thing. Like we know that, I'll just call him T. We know that T loves his fuzzies and he loves his blankets and he loves his pillows. And I started like early on, I tried, and I kind of feel bad, but I kind of don't at the same time, but because I was a learning process as a parent, it was like, when he was younger, I saw that this was a habit that he always had to have like 20 pillows in his bed and, all these stuffed animals. And so when he was like 6 and 7, I was trying to train him out of that. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of just stopped trying. And then I was like, you know what? This is a battle that I don't have the energy for. So I'm going to stop and just let him be. And it just, it was never an issue again. So now I'm where he also has ADHD. And so I'm trying to work on, okay, I'm not going to remove these things off your bed, but let's organize them and make them look presentable when you're not using your bed. Mm-hmm. So he has his stuffed animals and his pillows lined up against the wall because his bed is up against it. Yeah. Like, let's straighten out our blankets. We know they're here. So while you're in school, you know that they're safe, they're together. You don't even have to think about them. And then as soon as you come home, you can make your pile. You can roll around. You can bring your blankets out to the living room. You can bring a pillow so we have boundaries around it because, oh my gosh, if we just let him be, it will be all over.
Right. And I think you're touching on so many really beautiful things. One, sometimes we have fears. And I know that I have an 8-year-old who loves stuffies. And interestingly, I have a 10-year-old who is very like stoic and does not he's never had to comfort anything in his life. He wouldn't take a binky, I don't know. He's so interesting. And he will say isn't he a little bit old for that? And I'll ask him, what do you mean? What do you think is going to happen if a 8-year-old or a 9-year-old really loves stuffies? What are you afraid of? And I see that with parents sometimes. They're like, well, he's a boy. He needs to man up. I'm like, guess what? An 8-year-old's not a man. Yeah. And if a grown man wants some soft blankets, maybe that's actually okay. Maybe we can make that okay. Yeah. Maybe we can have the confidence in ourselves to say, look, I like certain feeling things. I like the texture of certain materials, and I'm not going to be ashamed of that. And the people that, maybe they were raised with these really rigid rules, kind of arbitrary rules, maybe those aren't your people. Maybe you meet some really cool neurodivergent people or neurodivergent, tangentially related people, their brother had neurodivergencies or their mom or whoever, right? They get it. And they're like, yeah, what harm is that? You can totally find those people. And I think that for me, the stuffies and the blinkies and stuff, that part isn't hard for me. It's actually my oldest, the way that his humor can be really dark and he's so young that I'm like, oh, I don't know that you can say that because I worry about people, their judgment. And I was with a group that it's like a homeschooling group where pretty much all of the parents and kids have some level of neurodivergency.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was talking about her son and some of the jokes he was making at the park. And I was like, that sounds just like my kid. And I was like, oh, wow. Like you can find places where it doesn't freak people out. Like these are your people. And so I shifted my perspective to helping him find his people instead of trying to change him to make everybody his people. Because honestly,
Right.
like that's not going to work anyway.
No. It'll backfire eventually.
Yeah, but there are still boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, I'm responsible for keeping our home somewhat-ish orderly, and I have ADHD, and that's not easy for me. So no, 4,000 stuffies can't go in the living room because I'm going to get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
You have a space for that, and you can utilize that space. But the living room, the family place where we all coexist, that doesn't work for everyone else. So there are limits around that. You know, even with my son's humor, he was holding somebody's baby and he starts like poking at the baby. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm looking for the self-destruct button. You can't say that. Like the mom looked at me like, I'm like, he's not actually violent. This is just
right.
humor. But I was like, you probably can't tell somebody you're trying to blow up their baby. Like that's a little too much, you know?
Yep.
And he can still learn those things. Learn when it's funny and appropriate and when maybe there's a line that is crossed. So I just wanted to touch on those things that, you know, being able to let go. Oh, and the other thing you said that was so incredible. I don't have the energy for this fight.
Yeah.
We have to know our limits. Like this, how important is this? Nope. My sanity is more important. Like my kid will wear shorts all winter.
Yep. Same thing. And that, especially with their ages, like as they get older, like with my 13-year-old, like I literally, like, it's an everyday decision. Like when he comes home and he has an attitude and obviously he's having an emotional response to something, whether it was negative or positive, I always welcome him home every day the exact same way, regardless of what he's feeling. I'm just always like, hey, welcome home. How was your day? Oh, you don't want to talk? Okay. And then like, if I could tell that he's like really actually upset. And my oldest is very, he's introverted. He very much keeps to himself. And so like, he's a hard nut to crack sometimes.
Yeah.
And so like, I'll just knock on his door because like, he's instant, like right in his room. Yeah. He's got the teenager. I live in my room down pat. And so I'll just knock on his door and be like, hey, I can see you're upset. Just want you to know, if you don't want to talk right now, that's cool. And when you're ready, just let me know.
Yeah.
Because I'm letting him process. He's got to learn how to process his emotions.
Right. And taking some space is an adult skill.
Yeah.
I think that it's so interesting when parents are afraid of that. They're like, well, he went to his room. Like, is that bad? I'm like, would it be bad for you to feel overwhelmed and say, I need a minute and go to your room? Like, this is a healthy coping strategy. This is, I'm not capable of being respectful right now, so I'm going to remove myself until I am. And this isn't I feel so much shame and I can't talk to my mom. This is just, I know that I'm kind of being a jerk and I need a minute to regulate, and knowing yourself enough, probably from your modeling, to take the space that you need to get right, to let go, decompress from the day, whatever it is. And you keeping that door open, being not the physical door, but the emotional door open to say, hey, I know something's up and I'm here when you're ready. And does he choose into that sometimes? Does he come tell you what's going on?
Yeah. I want to tell this funny, like, it's funny to me now,
but it wasn't.
So he's always been like, he's very focused. Like, I can tell he's going to be a driven person when he applies himself. And so for the longest time, he was like, girls, ick, I'm not going to have a girlfriend no matter what, like not until I'm like older. I'm like, cool. Cause I don't want
with that.
Like, I don't want to deal with dating yet. Like, I'm not ready. So earlier this year in the school year, he did get a girlfriend. He got his first girlfriend. And they dated for about a month. And it was so funny because he was like cute about it. He's like, I like her, but we never really like got them to connect like outside of school. So they go to 2 different school districts. So really they just communicated on the phone. So it's like a phone girlfriend basically.
Yeah.
Which was so cute in itself. And then finally, like, I noticed like he was really upset one day, and I'm like, "Hey, are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm not going to talk about it right now." And I was like, "Cool, just let me know."
I
Like,
love that boundary.
yeah. And then he came to me and he's like, I was like, like, I can tell, dude, I can tell you're not okay. Like,
Yeah.
at least give me something, like, because I didn't want him to shell up too much. And he was like, "Oh, I broke up with her." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, if you want to talk about it, just let me know." So then it was like through like over the course of a week,
Yeah.
I got little tidbits here and there.
The trickle
And
effect.
yes. And so it basically roundabout came out to be he broke up with her because she was annoying and was crazy. And I'm like, okay, first of all, this is where you recognize that you are not ready for a relationship. You are not emotionally ready to deal with a woman's emotional things. And I said, and just so you know, all girls at this age are annoying and crazy because we feel boys are annoying and crazy. So let's just hold back. You can worry about relationships later. You can have friends. You can focus on that. But right now, you're not ready, dude. And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm good."
I love his self-awareness.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's tough. It's tough to not take it personally, right? Like to be able to hear that and be like, "You're right."
Yeah.
I love it. And sometimes that the other way to call it is breadcrumbing it feels a lot safer for them to be like, "I'll just drop a little bit and then I'll pull back and then I'll drop a little bit and I'll pull back." And they're kind of testing those waters because vulnerability is a very hard feeling. And a lot of parents think that vulnerability with our kids is a bad thing. I know growing up, like that could never happen. The idea of saying, "Ooh, I was wrong about that. I'm sorry," could never be in my home. And I think that there's a couple ways that can go sideways. One, kids end up thinking, "Oh, well, grown-ups never get it wrong," which, as we know, is not true. But then when they're an adult, they are thinking like, "I have to get everything right. And if I'm not, I have to just pretend that I am.
Yeah.
I have to deny that self-accountability because what does that say about my value or my core self?" And when you're raised with somebody who's able to go, "Oh, yeah, I was wrong about that one," then they're able to do that. And I noticed that in my 10-year-old, because he's my oldest, he's really good at that. He needs a minute. He has to regulate. He can get real set off and he has to be able to come down, but he can articulate, "This is what I was thinking. This is where it went sideways for me. This is how I felt." Like, he's great at that. And I believe that comes from me modeling that for him, me being able to say, "Yeah, man, I really shouldn't have yelled at you like that. I felt incredibly frustrating, and that's my problem. I am responsible for my emotions. Even if I'm frustrated, it is my job to go, oh, that's too much for me. I need a minute." And by doing that, I'm able to make it a home where it's safe to do that process of vulnerability and ownership and accountability. And one of the things that that does not mean is sharing every single feeling you have with your child.
Right.
You're adults. They are not our emotional support people, and they shouldn't be. We need friends. We might need a therapist. We might need, talk to our spouse, but our children are not that. It's not their job to take care of us emotionally.
Right.
And we should still own it when we F up, because we're going to sometimes.
Yep. I totally feel that.
And it sounds like you've done that, because to have a 13's a hard age.
It really is. It's so cute though. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm one of those parents. I'm like, I am loving having a teenager because
I adore teenagers.
Oh my gosh. The hardest thing for me is to keep a straight face when he's like having an attitude and he's just like, ugh, about everything. And like, why do I have to do this? And I'm just like, you're just so darn cute right now. Like, I just want to squeeze you, but I'm like, I have to remain, I have to be like, okay, I understand you're frustrated, but the way you're talking to me is not okay.
Right. This isn't how we talk to our family.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. So we'll use this as an opportunity to talk about adolescence. So in adolescence, the developing brain, prefrontal cortex, this front part, doesn't fully develop until 26 in boys, even longer for boys with ADHD, for people with ADHD. But in boys, 26, and girls, 25, these are rough ages. Every human has a different trajectory of development, but these are rough ages. The limbic center, though, that's in control of the emotions, goes rapid fire in adolescence. So you've got tortoise in the hair.
Yeah.
You have got the hair with these emotions taking off. Yeah. And then you've got the tortoise like doo-doo, 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 doo-doo. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for things like time management, emotional control, thinking before you act, thinking, oh, let's see in the past these things, and maybe if I do this, like thinking through, taking a big task and breaking it into pieces. This is why you'll have a lot of high schoolers that like stink at getting projects in, or they'll wait till like the last second. Yeah. Me. Yeah. But it's all executive functioning. And so they're not going to be good at it. They start to look like adults though. So we start to think of them as little adults instead of its own developmental sphere. And they still very much do need their parents, and they are still very much able to make good decisions if they have all of the information. And so you talked earlier about how important it is for them to make choices in their life that are age appropriate. And it's so important that our kids know we believe them and we believe in them. Mm-hmm. We're not going to have, when I say this, sometimes parents are like, oh, I just didn't have any standards for my teen. No, not at all. They want us to believe in them. Yeah. And when they're struggling, we want to break that down and look at what is making this a challenge. What kind of scaffolding or support do you need? He seems to know what he needs. He needs a minute. He needs to go decompress because he comes in the door kind of jacked up. Yeah. Sometimes he needs to ask questions. Why do I have to clean the table? Great question. What do you think? When you have kids, what would you tell them? It's something I asked my oldest because he is really good at answering questions, not so much at being told. Still happens. It's a necessary part of life, but it's not his favorite. But I'll ask him, and some things he's like, well, I'll do that differently. I'm like, more power to you. Like, you get to make your own choices. I require my kids to stay at the table, finish their food, and then be done. I hate the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it is hard for them, whether it's the neurodivergence or not. I don't know. It is very hard for them to do that. And it's something that's super important to me for a whole list of reasons. It's a different podcast. But that's one of the things. He's like, I'm not doing that. I don't care. My kids can come and go. I'm like, awesome. That might work for you. It doesn't work for me. And it doesn't work for our family with the needs that we all have. So while we're here, this is the system. And we don't have to be afraid as parents of making some of those calls. Children need and want a leader. Yeah. You do not want to feel like they have to make every decision all day. Have you heard of decision fatigue? It's exhausting. So sometimes these teens, they need the autonomy. Their brain is wired to become themselves, to break out. That's going to require pushing on some of the boundaries. And at 13, some of those boundaries are going to stay right there. Yeah. And at 15, they might move out a little bit. And at 16, they might move out a little bit more. And there's this gradual progression of you are in control of your life, but not at 13, not totally and completely. We can still have a conversation about it. That's cool. But part of breaking into yourself is challenging and questioning and pushing on some of those boundaries. And part of being an effective leader is, I actually know exactly why this is a rule in our home. And it's important enough that I'm going to hold it. I miss your face, Yummy. I see your stone collection has quadrupled and I'm loving it. Well, thank you. Yes, I have my own little addiction going. It just says Facebook user. I don't know who said it, but good to see you. So we can do that with kindness, with emotional safety, and with the confidence that we're making these choices for valid reasons. And these are the choices that are the parents to make. And as our kids are moving into the end, because adolescence goes until 24, it's 12 to 24. It's not 18. 18 is nothing. Developmentally, Actually, 18 is nothing.
That's
You don't
what
understand
society
this
has
society.
deemed, right?
I don't know where that number came from, and I've never gotten a good answer. Somebody tell me in the comments, where did 18 come from? Because, you know, they did a really cool study with 14-year-olds, and I don't know exactly how they did it. If I'm remembering correctly, they had like a series of questions where they would like read a story, background, whatever, and have the 14-year-olds make a decision, have the adults make a decision. And if they gave the 14-year-olds all of the information, they made basically as good a choices as the adults. It was pretty equal. They're not dumb. They're inexperienced.
Right.
And so we get to fill that experience gap while they're making choices that they need to make to develop and to continue to grow. And every kid is different. And having the emotional safety that you talked about means that they can start to reflect back to you their thinking process, where they are, and you can start to have more and more faith and confidence in them as they're developing. You know, and man, kids come up with great ideas.
Yeah.
I love asking them, like, okay, what's your suggestion? What do you think? You know, because sure, this is annoying. Some things are annoying and we just have to do them, but some things are annoying and we can do them better.
Yep.
I can't think of all the things in the universe. By all means, do share, you know?
Right.
And that is not a threat to my authority.
Right.
Ideas, pff, please. I love ideas. We have ideas all day. But I have to have the emotional maturity to not be placing my value as a parent in their behavior. It's in my behavior, and I'm in control of that.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between creating emotional safety for your teens versus your tots?
Oh man, that's a hard one, because in my experience, when my boys were small, they were both fiercely independent. Like, that's honestly why I taught myself how to crochet, was because I literally was bored. Like, they were fine playing, and they didn't even want me to play with them. Like, they were just like, feed me, I'm hungry, or I'm hurt, fix me. Like, I need comfort. Like, that for like 5 seconds. Like, they just, so I was bored, right? So I'm like, you guys are cute. Do you want me? Like, so, and that's still, even now, like, they're still very independent. Like,
interesting.
And so I just check in with them, be like, hey, I noticed you guys haven't eaten in like 6 hours. Like, do you guys need a snack? Like, do you need reminders? And that's just like reminding them to live at this point.
This happens with ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, sometimes it helps me to remind them, because it also reminds me.
Yeah. I haven't eaten today either.
Let's make something together. So yeah, like when they were toddlers, it really was just being there and like being open and like learning how to express. Like, I learned very quickly that I don't emotionally handle babies and up to the age of 3. Like, before they can actually start using words to communicate, I don't handle them that age emotionally at all. I get so frustrated that I had so many bad days as a mom. And in that time, I literally believed that I was a terrible mother. But it was just because I didn't have anyone to tell me that I was doing good by walking away and taking a break and then going back to the situation.
Yeah.
Like, I will openly admit, I left my children in their crib for 15 to 20 minutes screaming their head off because I was screaming my head off and I didn't want to scare them. So I was making sure they were safe. I walked outside and screamed.
Good. Get it out.
Yeah.
Away from them, where you're not scaring them, where they are safe. Sad is not the same thing as in danger.
Right.
And being screamed at by your parent, that's in danger to the nervous system. Screaming because you're sad, it sucks. But you know what? Mom will come back when she can. Yeah. And knowing that for yourself is literally saves lives. Like, let's not understate it. It literally saves lives.
Yeah. So once they started communicating, I think they were actually right about like 3, 4, 5, that group, when I actually found you and started following you. And it was something that you told me, like, or you were telling the audience, but I picked up on that clicked with me, was like, our children are not us. They are their own humans. and they have their own emotions and their own needs, and we are there to support them. And that clicked for me right at that age, to where I was like, okay, I'm here to, they don't know what the heck they're doing emotionally. Like, they have no grasp other than this made me mad, or
Yeah.
I'm hungry and I want to murder everyone. Like, maybe
Rage
not
hunger is a
it really, even in boys, like, oh my gosh, those, oh man, they scare me sometimes. They're my little T-Rex, I swear. Like that meme of like, you know, like holding back, like that is legit.
for real.
So, you know, just it just clicked for me, and then I was able to be like, okay, I'm going to not spank them because they're having an emotional response.
Good.
Like, I didn't want to spank them. Like, did we have situations where their dad like was enraged instantly and woke them up by spanking them and dragged them outside? Like, I disagreed with it, but I let him handle it. And to this day, like, this is something that I'm still working on.
Yeah.
Is to this day, those children, though my boys, have the distinct memory of that.
Yeah.
Did it traumatize them? I don't know if I can label that. I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
But to this day, they know that what they did was wrong, and it made Dad mad.
See, I want to pause you there because it did not make Dad mad. Dad allowed his anger to get the best of him. Children cannot make us feel anything. Yeah. And it's very common language. I'm not picking on you.
Right.
But it's so important to, if there becomes an opportunity to go, you know what? Actually, Dad is responsible for his emotional behavior. He made a choice. Mm-hmm. You did not deserve to be hit ever for any reason.
Yeah.
And part of parenting is learning and growing. And we literally didn't know that. There is a period of time I didn't know that. I just didn't have my own children yet. I had siblings that I was parenting. And when you're raised, like people, okay, so there's like a couple camps. One, when you choose to shift your mindset and you're like, no, I'm not going to hit my kids about anything. That's not cool. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can get to this sort of superiority place where it's like, you dumb people, why can't you see? And it's almost defensive.
Right.
And you forget, or maybe you never were in this camp, what it felt like for that to be the only reality you knew. It was the only reality that I knew growing up. Mm-hmm. My babysitters hit us. My friends' parents hit them. My grandparents hit us. Like, there was never the opportunity for my mind to consider that humans could be raised any other way.
Right.
Until a long series of events, which is also another podcast, that it was like a, wait a minute, what?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of moment. So I can feel for those little boys because I know that feeling of that, like, I'll call it traumatic, for me at least, that traumatic memory and having this tied to this person that you do love, that's supposed to love you, that's showing you what love is, and then it gets tied with hurt. That sucks. And I know that feeling of almost like a fear, if I don't do this, I've failed my children.
Right.
Which is born from their parenting, which is born from their parenting, which is the entire point of cycle breaking.
Right.
Being in this moment of, I am terrified that I might be making the wrong choice, but I know how I felt. And if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to err on the side of treating you with dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's corrections that happen, right? Sometimes people do go a little too far and they're like, I'm so afraid of having any rules. And then they have a 16-year-old, this was in a book recently, who doesn't know how to order food because they've never had like the tools to push them to be like,
right,
try it, do it, right? They're like so afraid to cause any kind of discomfort whatsoever. Okay, well then there's an error, right? We can still correct for that. Mm-hmm. Correcting for this kind of error is a little trickier, right? It requires like a lot, and it might require them to go through their own process when they have fully formed brains to go, yeah, that sucked. And despite that, I can still have a healthy relationship with my parents because I can call it out. I can talk about it. I can make my own decisions. You know, I talk to parents who are in all these different camps. Some of them, like, their parents were the cycle breaker, really. Right. And so they're just like, parenting kind of the way they were parented. And they're like, well, duh. And in that case, you might genuinely not know what it's like to have a worldview that has only been informed one way.
Mm-hmm.
Children are only exposed to what they're exposed to. So your brain forms with this reality, and you have to find a way to make it make sense. Most children find that the only way they can make that make sense is to blame themselves. And then the parents blame their children because that's the only thing they have. We have two basic needs: our need for attachment and our need for safety. So if our safety person is hurting us, we can't also break the attachment. A 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, whatever, they can't be like, you are a bad dad and I'm never talking to you again. They will die, actually. Like if they go off in the world on their own, they will die.
Right.
It's not an option. So the only way they can make sense of that is to turn it inward and go, I'm bad. I deserve to be hurt because I can't lose that attachment. So that's the part we correct later. If we make these kinds of choices and we later are like, because it happens, like a whole bunch of our group has had some version of this in their past. And it absolutely can be repaired. That's the beauty. That's my favorite fact about parenting, is that any mistake that you make with your kids, you can repair. I have seen 65-year-olds repair with 82-year-old mothers. Okay. It is a thing.
Yeah.
And it requires that vulnerability, which sucks. We hate it. And it is I thought I was doing the right thing. And as I sit with this and I learn and I listen and I allow myself to experience the world through your eyes, or even see your reaction years later, I go, ooh, no, I don't like that decision. And if I had to do it over again, I would do it a little differently. No. And sometimes that's us as a mother going, yeah, no, I would have stood my ground and said, hey, you can be pissed. Go punch the punching bag, get it out of your system, because grabbing them, snatching them up out of rage, that's not control. That's not a choice. That's a reaction.
Yeah.
And we can't go back in the past, but we can actually, in a way, overlay past memories with new understanding by helping make sense of it in that ownership place, not the blame place, but the ownership place. And that can be really, really transformationally healing. So I appreciate you sharing that aspect, because you're not alone. We, a recent book that came out said something about like, this is the first generation that's been raised completely without spanking. I'm like, that's not true.
No, it's not.
69% of parents in the last survey I read have spanked their kids at least once.
Yeah.
That's a lot. There's no, and it did come down from 89%.
Yeah.
So like, in my opinion,
yes, that's awesome.
But the notion that you are a failure as a parent, if this is anywhere in your past and you've ruined your kids forever, that's not how humans work.
Yeah.
Okay. You own any mistakes you make. Figure out, how did I make this? How did I get to this place? And how can I take ownership of my thoughts, my behaviors, my fears, my expectations, whatever those are?
Yeah.
And how do I own them? Because my thought is, we want that your husband wanted to teach them something.
Right.
And every single adult human who learns every day, whether they learn a trade or they learn a craft or they learn a skill or they get a degree, they learn without being hit. So I promise you it's possible.
It is.
And that's the journey, kind of the work. And is it always easy? No, it's hard. It's miserable. It's decoupling all kinds of crap in your brain. I totally get that. And it's totally possible.
Yeah.
So I think that's rad. And I don't even remember what led us to that like, and this is the thing. This is how it works. So it must have needed to be said. It must have needed to be talked about for our audience.
And one of the things that like was kind of like my aha is like when I realized, because like it's not like we went into parenting saying like we're going to be spankers or we're not going to be spankers. Like it just kind of happens. And like as they've gotten older, obviously we've done it like less and less and less because like it doesn't make a difference. Like we didn't see a change in them. Isn't
that interesting? And there's studies that back that up. For about 30 minutes, it improves, quote unquote, behavior for about 30 minutes. And then
they're scared and they're hurt.
Yes. it shocks their nervous system into a freeze response.
Yeah.
Or a fawn response. But over time, it makes for more aggressive behavior. And if they can't show it to you, they show it to each other or they show it to their peers.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like, oh,
I know.
Boys, like, they are, what's interesting, like, to me, it's like having kids is like a social experiment one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, what happens if we take this child with this personality and this child with this personality and force them to live together? Like, what's going to happen? Okay, well, they have opposite point of views and have opposite opinions, even at 5-6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're going to, it might be the fighting over a toy or whose turn it is. But yeah, like my 10-year-old, he's got like this, oh man, this boy holds a grudge like nobody's business. Like I've had to teach him, like, and it's ongoing. And I know as he gets older, I'm going to have to teach him different methods to do this. But it's like, okay, I understand you're angry and you want to hold on to this, but it's going to hurt you more. And so I've had to like actually like physically step in and be like, okay, you had this argument 2 hours ago. Your brother's already let it go. You are not going to go into his room
to start again.
Right. Like, no, we're done. We've moved on. Like, you're the only one that's holding on to this. Like, come on now.
One thing that might help him now that he's older is because usually when we're holding on to something, what we're doing is we're dress rehearsing for this thing to happen again. We're mentally like creating this scenario because we think if we like practice enough in our head, then we'll be able to prevent it. So what we've been working really hard on in our family is boundaries. And so I will say to the 10-year-old, okay, well, what boundary can you place to impact this? What part of this is actually in your control? Some things are just literally different opinions. Like that is what it is. My 2 boys spent like 2 hours arguing yesterday about I can't even explain it because it won't even make sense. They play video games with their dad, and then they will take those and turn them into like imaginary games. And they were trying to combine 2 games, but the numbers don't match up. So one had one strategy, one had the other, and they argued about it for ages. The 10-year-old's very frustrated because the 8-year-old's like, don't really care, don't want to. Yeah. And it's like, buddy, you don't have control over his brain. You have control over whether you play with him or not. Yeah. He's like, I'm not playing with you. I'm like, great, that's your boundary. I don't want to play that way. It isn't fair. I'm not playing. Then you actually walk away though, because just standing there screaming that, hoping it'll change his mind, that's not actually a boundary.
Right.
So as I'm like helping him to go, good, that's a good boundary. That you do have control over, that you don't, he came up with an analogy that was able to explain it. It involved donuts. Like, all right, good for you, man. That is persistence at work. And they were able to work it out. But I am on guard because I'm not about, punching your brother over an imaginary game. You can be angry. You can kick an Amazon box. You don't have the right to physically assault his body because you're mad. And they're really, really, really good at that now. But we literally will go on YouTube and search the boundary song and sing the boundary song. And you would think that they would roll their eyes at me, but they actually love it. So I don't know. I don't have a 13-year-old, but my 10-year-old is totally on board with this funny little song. It's made for like little kids, but all of them love it. And my 4-year-old will say to me, I don't remember what it was. I think I told her to get her ice cold Tootsies off my legs. It was like painfully cold. She goes, is that your boundary? I'm like, that is my boundary. Thank you. So it's been a fun conversation and a valuable one. And so when I talk to an adult who's in that position and they're just like, it's like, okay, what part of this actually is in your control? And with that information, how do you then take that and apply your boundary to the situation? And remember, boundaries are what I will or will not do. It is not about controlling the other person. It is what I will or will not do, regardless of what you do, which is why I'm not playing with you is absolutely a healthy boundary.
Yeah.
I don't think this is fair. This is not how I want to play. I'm leaving this room. Great. Okay, so Facebook user, sorry. I don't know why it doesn't tell me names. The trauma is so deep for me that the minute the chaos in my brain becomes scrambled eggs, I literally know to walk away and cool off, but my body struggles and will sit there and yell And then I come back with my tail between my legs to apologize to my kids. Controlling my reaction despite your many amazing tools is still such a struggle, especially during certain times of the month. I need a reactiondectomy. Fair. And because I don't know who this is, I apologize if I know the answer to this question, but do you have a therapist? Have you done EMDR? Have you done DBT? And DBT really, really helps you to broaden your tolerance for distressing emotions. Because here's the thing, whether you have the parents who are like, oh, don't cry, here's a sucker, here's a candy, here's the, please stop crying, or you have the, you stop crying right now or I'll give you something to cry about. Both of those parents cannot tolerate distressing emotions. And if you had either one, chances are your body has not learned what comes up must come down. It's okay. I feel angry. Angry is not an emergency. I don't need to rush to make this go away. I can just feel it. Anger is a sign that something's not quite right here. And I can go, what is in my control? Where are my boundaries? Where are the limits that I need to set? Right? I know it is tricky. I totally know that. And it is an ongoing thing. And if I feel like I know who this might be. And so I kind of want to be careful what I say because I don't want to out anybody. Although I guess if you commented with your name. I might be able to see it. Hold on. We'll see if I can see because it doesn't tell me. No, it's not who I thought it was. Okay. First of all, you're not alone because it made me think of somebody else. So there you go. What is your next step? If you're in a space where you're cycling, so when you realize I have a reactionary problem, right? The first step is even realizing it at all. The next step is realizing it after you have reacted. The next step is realizing it in the middle of the reaction. So what do you have to cut yourself off, to pattern interrupt? You have neuronal connections between anger and reaction. They're there, they're connected. You have to break that connection. So for me, when I was yelling a lot, I don't even know about a lot, but it was the reactivity kind of yelling. And I didn't feel bad about it. I was just like, oh, well, I'm not hitting anybody, so I have the right to yell. I don't know. I didn't really think about it. Mm-hmm. And then a study was released that correlated the same, or maybe even proved, I can't remember now, the same damage to the same regions of the brain between spanking and between yelling, like where your kids are like cowering and afraid of you kind of yelling, where they like jump and they're like, wow, like if you scare your kids from your rage, that's not okay no matter what your rage looked like. Okay, I get that now. But it was like are you effing kidding me kind of moment for my brain. I was pissed. But I'm not going to deny the science. So then I needed to figure out a plan because I'm not going to keep doing this. So in that space of realizing I'm starting, what are you? Like painfully stopping, I would open my refrigerator and yell into my fridge. Because I might have already talked about this, but I've talked about it a lot, so I can't remember when. But I did that specifically because it made it clear to my brain, they are not the people to yell at. I don't yet have the control to stop my volume from going haywire, but I'm at least going to direct it elsewhere. And I would stop saying words and just make noises. So I'd be like, like ridiculous stuff. Okay. But also with the fridge doors open, it was so clear to my kids, like mom might be going crazy. Not at us. And that was a huge step for me to breaking that connection in my brain. And then finding other things, closing my lips and humming, singing instead of yelling. When you sing, you send signals to your brain that you're safe. So when you are, Marines will do this. They like they're in like dangerous situations. Like they could be thrown into fight or flight and they can't afford that. They will chant or sing to tell their brain, nope, we're safe. We're in control here. It's like it triggers a whole different part of your brain in order to do that. Sing something stupid. Sing the Itsy Bitsy Spider. Okay? Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout, but she didn't have 10 laundry loads that got dumped on the floor. I'm not gonna scream because I want to be a better mom. And the itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. It doesn't have to make sense, right? But like doing something different with that energy. The energy is not the problem. It is the connection your brain has to, if I have this energy, I must do this. We just need to shift that. Okay.
I love that.
That's, thank you for commenting. I really appreciate it. Hopefully that is helpful. Do you want to share anything else that has been really, really poignant for you in creating emotional safety for your boys?
Honestly, it's just being open, communicative with what you're feeling and why you're feeling it and what you hope to get out of it.
I love that one.
Just teaching them that it's okay to have emotions because again, like they're boys, society has the aspect that they have to be masculine. They can't have emotions because if they have emotions, then they're soft and that's not acceptable. And I hate that. It's like, no, we're all humans.
Right.
We all have emotions, whether they're positive or negative, and we have to acknowledge them and we have to sit with them. It's like, why do we question why we're happy? What makes us happy? Why is that okay? But expressing and figuring out, why does this make me angry? Why is that not accepted?
Yeah.
Like, yes, you're allowed to have your emotions. And as kids, they don't know the reasons behind their emotions. They just know what they're feeling. And so just being the soundboard for them to be able to vent, especially when things are out of their hands in a society, like in school, like why did they get in trouble for something that they had nothing to do with? They were just standing there. It's like, because you were there.
Yeah. And being told by an adult, that doesn't sound fair. You're not wrong. That can be an incredibly healing thing. We talked at the very beginning about having an adult that can bear witness and walk with you through things. Yeah. That prevents crappy stuff from becoming traumas.
Yeah. So really, it just boils down to just being their safety net, being there to catch them when they need you, and giving them the freedom to explore the world around them.
So they can practice those hard feelings. They're going to be hurt. They're going to be disappointed. They're going to, make a dumb call. They're going to say the wrong thing to their friend, or they're going to upset their girlfriend. Like, they're going to go through these things. And if they think, oh, if I tell my mom about this, she's going to tell me I'm an idiot, they're not going to tell you. If they think, if I tell my mom about this, she's going to help me figure this out, then they're going to want to come to you.
I will say, I have no filter. And this is my learning curve. Because when my 13-year-old says something to his friend, and or he makes a decision that legitimately was a stupid choice, like, I will call him out. I'll be like, okay, first of all, that was not a smart decision, and here's why.
That is different than you're a fucking idiot.
Right, exactly.
That wasn't a great choice, man. Oh, pain.
Yeah.
That's totally different.
Like, I do this like all the time. I'm always like I'll say his name, I'll just say K. I'll just be like, hey, dude, come on. Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, our word of the house is really?
Yeah.
Like, seriously? Like, you thought that was a brilliant idea. Like, that was not. So
but you said something earlier. What were you wanting to happen? And that's a great reflective question. We often say, why did you do that? Kids often can't answer that question. They don't know why. They just did it. It's impulsive. And the whole thinking before you act thing's not fully developed yet.
Right.
So what were you hoping happened? Is a backdoor sideways route to that same answer. Yeah. And it is so helpful to hear that, because we might think, oh, well, I was just hoping to punch my brother. But then you hear, oh, well, I asked him to stop pinching me 17 times and he wouldn't stop. So I shoved him off of me. And I'm like, oh, what looked like you punching your brother was really you defending yourself. I get that. Yeah. What were you hoping to accomplish by pinching your brother 17 times?
Right.
Well, he wouldn't give me back my whatever. And I'm like, okay, so what we have here is a skills deficit. You have a goal. You're not sure how to reach that goal. And you made an immature solution. You picked an immature solution. So how about now that I know this gap is here, give you better tools? and that can include asking mom or dad for help because you're still here in our home. We're allowed to still help you. And guess what? When you're in college, we can still help you. But I'm not going to go argue with your teacher if you get yourself a bad grade.
Right? Yeah. Nope. I'm always like, when Kay has a teacher that he absolutely hates, and he's always coming home and complaining about that teacher. And I'm like, you know what? Think about this from the teacher's point of view. It's a junior high teacher. He's got to worry about all these other kids. He is not picking on you specifically. He does not hate you and is not willing to not help you. He just doesn't have the time. And maybe have you communicated what you actually need help with, or are you being vague with what you're needing help with? Like, let's figure out, like, yeah, it's like, okay, let's, I understand you don't like that teacher, but you only got like 3 months left of school. So you're just going to have to like learn to communicate or just deal.
My son is so great at saying, is it a problem if? So if I had said, it sounds like there's maybe a little bit of like wanting to minimize that level of frustration. And he would go, is there a problem with me not liking this teacher? And I would go, no, actually there's not. You don't have to like people. Like, you're allowed to not like someone. And it sounds like this is bothering you. So what part of that do you get to control? You get to control what you communicate, how you communicate your needs, how you ask for help. Maybe you get kind of stopped up and you're not really sure what to say. You can write an email to your teacher. I have those emails. Maybe in the middle of class isn't their greatest time. Maybe you ask, like, what are your office hours? Can I come by after school? I found that almost every single teacher had more respect for me when I would take my extra time after school, before school, to come and ask them a question. I was like, oh, you care about this, whatever the subject was. All right. And once they think you care, most teachers really do have an easier time going out of their way for you. It doesn't feel like a waste, Some teachers suck. I was a teacher. I love teachers. Some teachers suck. So I can't say one way or another which one it is, but what is your goal? Where do you have power and control? What can you do? Because we can't control, how the teacher acts per se, but you do have the power to communicate, the power to choose a new way to communicate. And I think sometimes that's really hard to see when you're right in it. It's too close. So as parents, we get to kind of bring that out a little bit and help them see the bigger picture of, okay, this is annoying to me because of this. And we know our kids, like, we know the difference between somebody who's being insulted and browbeaten in class versus somebody who's like, oh, they keep making me read. And it's like, I think they might be pushing you to achieve a little more. It is annoying. I get it. And it is part of their job. So if you control, communicating, maybe you say, hey, I get really severe anxiety. I know I can't just not read. Can you let me go first? Because otherwise I can't hear anything anybody's saying anyway. I would rather start. That way I can hear the rest. And then I know what I'm going to read when I come to class. I can prepare. I don't know many teachers that wouldn't be like, sure.
Right.
Proactive problem solving can go a long way. But I think that if there is a very strong sense that the teacher just cares about control, you don't necessarily trust that. And like I said, some teachers suck, and that.
Yeah, that's what I told him. I was just like, you know what? You're not going to get along with every human. So but you're in a situation where we can't change your teacher. Like, we don't have that option. Right. So you either you just have to deal with it, but be respectful at the same time.
Yeah. And where can you find your power? And sometimes that is literally in practicing your self-regulation. Like, this class is going to piss me off every single day. This particular customer, this particular, manager or whatever, I'm going to use my skills. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to regulate. That might be tapping. Like, I tap my chest, which is not one of the official tapping points. The official ones are like a question mark. So it's top of the head, forehead, the side of the eye, under the eye, under the nose, on top of your lip, and then I think your chest. There might be
collarbones.
Collarbones, yeah. I think, is there one here?
I don't know. I just know the collarbone one.
Yeah, I know the collarbone one. And the reason I end up going to chest is because that's where like my inner child kind of resides. So usually if I'm stressed out about something, there's some connection to my inner child. And so tapping there is really helpful, and humming stimulates the vagus nerve. So for the Facebook user, singing works partially because of the humming. So if you're like, I am not singing at the grocery store, okay, fine. You don't have to be weird like me. I get it. Because I absolutely will. But you can hum instead. And the thing with humming is you can do it at different intensities. If you're real mad, you can hum real hard. And you can slowly start to release the intensity of your hum to get softer and softer, and it brings down your nervous system. So that's a cool one too that you can do for yourself at home. Can you hear that my printer just turned on like a ghost is in the room? That was weird.
You've got some energy going on over there.
Apparently. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today. Let us know how we can find you. For anybody who wants to learn crochet or who wants to use crochet and creativity to help their mindset, help their stress load, should they follow you personally? Should they follow a business page?
I've got two ways for that. Yes, you can follow me personally. I'm all about making friends. So if you want to follow me personally, just find me on Facebook, Amanda Woodbury. And then if you want to follow me for crochet stuff, just find Unravel Your Stress. There's a business page. That is where I navigate all of that stuff. So
awesome. And I will post the link for your business page underneath this video.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here and chatting with us, and I will talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.